On November 9, 2025, in the Caribbean Sea, USS Gerald R. Ford, a $13.3 billion nuclear-powered supercarrier, carried 54 F-35C and F/A-18E fighter jets. Escorting it were two destroyers, USS John Finn and USS Gridley. Their mission: reach Naval Air Station Roosevelt Roads, where 420 Navy pilots were scheduled to conduct precision strike training in the coming week. The unexpected happened. The Venezuelan warship ARV Libertad 29 suddenly launched 11 supersonic missiles, directly threatening more than 7,000 American sailors. The commanders aboard believed that overwhelming firepower meant victory and would serve as a warning to the United States. But they were wrong. Washington responded by activating Operation Silent Trident. The submarine USS California, SSN 781, was already in pursuit, with one goal: eliminate the most aggressive symbol of Venezuela's national pride. Can the U.S. destroyers stop this sudden wave of firepower? Or will Venezuela's missiles destroy America's $13 billion floating fortress? Let's uncover the truth. At 4:52 a.m. on November 9, 2025, the Caribbean Sea looked impossibly calm, flat, dark, and silent. But cutting through that silence was one of the most powerful formations the United States had sent into the region in 6 years: USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, a 100,000-ton nuclear carrier worth $13.3 billion, moved forward with steady purpose. On its deck sat 54 aircraft, F-35C Lightning IIs and F/A-18E Super Hornets, secured like a floating vault of American air power. On either flank, two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS John Finn, DDG-113, and USS Gridley, DDG-101, swept a 240-mile radar arc around the strike group like a steel halo. Together, the three ships carried nearly 7,000 sailors, all moving in perfect formation toward their next objective: rotating aircraft into Naval Air Station Roosevelt Roads, located 118 nautical miles northeast of Curacao, where more than 420 Navy pilots were scheduled to conduct precision strike training in the coming week. But routine missions can collapse without warning. At 5:01 a.m., only 27 nautical miles north of Venezuela's Paraguana Peninsula, waters Caracas has repeatedly and incorrectly claimed as its own, USS John Finn detected something off. A radar contact appeared inside Venezuelan territory, moving well beyond legal speed limits, accelerating from 18 knots to 31, then 42 in less than 2 minutes. The image sharpened. ARV Libertad 29, a Venezuelan warship valued at $750 million, racing at attack speed. It carried 20 RBS-15 Mk-3 anti-ship missiles, Chinese manufactured and capable of flying at Mach 2, skimming just 5 meters above the water. These missiles were built to sink carriers. A single one could tear a destroyer in half. Following protocol, the U.S. destroyer transmitted a clear, steady hail in English and Spanish. "Venezuelan naval vessel, this is USS John Finn. We are operating in international waters." At 5:05 a.m., without warning or negotiation, the Libertad 29 launched 11 anti-ship missiles in a coordinated strike. They screamed across the surface, gliding at lethal low altitude. 11 warheads, each carrying 165 kilograms of explosive, racing toward the American destroyer. This was not confusion, this was not caution, this was deliberate, a decision that dragged the Caribbean to the edge of war. 5:11 a.m. The moment 11 Venezuelan missiles tore across the surface of the sea. Aboard USS John Finn, the first missile icon blinked red on the tactical display. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire Combat Information Center, CIC, was flooded with deep red alerts. 11 anti-ship missiles were inbound, traveling at nearly 2,300 kilometers per hour, now only minutes away from impact. Commander Ryan Alden stood on the bridge, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Activate the Aegis combat system. All batteries online. Fire control Alpha. Engage." The hull of USS John Finn shuddered as 17 SM-6 Block 1A interceptors, each costing $4.1 million, blasted upward from the vertical launch cells. 17 white streaks ripping into the dark Caribbean sky at Mach 3.5. Each missile was guided not by guesswork but by an AI-optimized radar network capable of tracking hypersonic threats with 1.2-second accuracy. The first interception occurred 10.8 nautical miles from the ship. A flash burst along the horizon, then another, and another. 9 Venezuelan missiles vanished in mid-air, shredded into fragments by U.S. interceptors in a storm of white light. Radar operators counted each kill, 9 missiles downed in under 40 seconds. But one missile broke through. The final RBS-15 Meki-3 slipped past the last SM-6, with less than 70 meters to spare, continuing its deadly glide toward the formation. USS Gridley attempted to fire its SM-2 battery, but its launch control system froze, a rare cascading failure caused by a damaged guidance module. A $2.7 million missile sat motionless in its tube as Venezuela's warhead descended. At 5:21 a.m., the missile slammed into the forward deck of USS Gridley, detonating beneath the ship's bow plating. The blast tore open 18 meters of steel, ripped apart the sonar dome, and produced a fireball measured at 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit, 870 degrees Celsius. 2 sailors suffered severe burns. 3 others were thrown overboard as shrapnel ripped through compartments. But the carrier, the true target, remained intact. The escort destroyers had fulfilled their mission. Inside the CIC, an encrypted notification flashed in green. Libertad 29 reports mission success returning to base. Above the Ford's Bridge, Admiral Jonathan Pierce, commander of Carrier Strike Group 9, watched the smoke spiraling from USS Gridley's bow. His face darkened. Then he spoke, voice low, eyes cold. "We will strike back in a way they never see coming." 40 nautical miles to the southeast, he contacted the weapons officer aboard USS California SSN 781, a Virginia-class attack submarine on patrol. After receiving the encrypted directive, the submarine adjusted depth, changed course, and began preparing its firing systems. The U.S. response would not be loud. It would be precise and devastating. Would America answer with a measured hand, or a hammer that the Caribbean would never forget? 5:30 a.m. While smoke from the USS Gridley still drifted across the formation, a far deadlier silence settled beneath the Caribbean. 40 nautical miles southeast of the fleet, the USS California, SSN 781, had already descended to attack depth, 125 meters below the surface, where sunlight vanished and war existed only as echoes and coordinates. Inside the control room, Lieutenant Commander Mark Hensley studied the firing solution projected across the console, tracking the retreating ARV Libertad 29, now running at 32 knots, unaware that every movement was being mapped in real time by California's ANBQ Q10 sonar. Capable of detecting a propeller signature from 74 kilometers away, every move they made was already known. Aboard the Libertad 29, sailors whispered confidently, believing they had completed their mission and delivered a warning to the United States for entering waters their government claimed as sovereign. A triumphant return awaited them, at least in their minds. But they had no idea a submarine had been shadowing them. "Solution locked," a technician murmured. Instantly, Admiral Pierce's order rolled through the bulkhead. "Execute counterstrike." At 5:32 a.m., 12 tons of hydraulic pressure forced open the submarine's forward launch doors. A deep tremor passed through the hull as the first UGM-84 Harpoon Block 2+ slid into the black water, followed immediately by 10 more. 11 missiles in total, each carrying a 221-kilogram fragmentation warhead, engineered to break a warship's spine. For a moment, the ocean swallowed everything. Then the missiles broke the surface. They erupted upward like silver phantoms, silent, cold, unstoppable. Before their turbojet engines ignited at 550 miles per hour, the volley carved a perfect arc toward the Libertad 29, approaching from an angle Venezuela's radar had never been designed to track. 5:35 a.m. on board Libertad 29, alarms finally screamed. But far too late. Minutes earlier, the crew had wasted 70% of their air defense missiles on targets they never touched. Their launchers were nearly empty. Radar screens flickered from overload. The fire control computer was trapped in a forced reboot cycle. The first harpoon tore into the midship fuel corridor. A white pillar of fire shot upward, engulfing nearby sailors. At least 9 crewmen were thrown across the deck. Several never rose again. The second missile struck moments later, detonating beneath the waterline, ripping a 9-meter gash clean through the hull. Water-flooded compartments instantly, bulkheads collapsed. Entire sections vanished under boiling seawater. 2 more missiles shattered the flight deck. The 5th detonated beneath the bridge, killing 14 command officers instantly. The final missiles exploded below the surface, a combined blast equivalent to 2,500 kilograms of high explosive. The Libertad 29, once the pride of the Venezuelan Navy, became a sphere of fire, splitting in half, steel twisting and burning as it sank toward the Caribbean floor. More than 120 sailors were thrown into the sea. At least 60 were missing in the first hour. The U.S. counterstrike lasted less than 4 minutes. Precision replaced chaos. Silence became the deadliest weapon on the water. By 5:40 a.m., barely minutes after the Libertad 29 split apart beneath the waves, the true scale of Venezuela's catastrophe began to unfold. A thick oil slick, stretching nearly 2 nautical miles, spread across the Caribbean like a black wound. Chunks of twisted steel, charred insulation, and fragments of the ship's shattered superstructure drifted in slow, silent spirals. The crackling sound of burning debris floated across the water. Survivors clung desperately to floating wreckage. Out of a crew of more than 180 sailors, only 23 were found alive in the first rescue sweep conducted by Venezuelan patrol helicopters. Most were burned, bleeding, or drifting unconscious. At least 60 men were unaccounted for, presumed lost in the explosion or dragged under as the ship broke apart. More than 40 bodies were floating face down, scattered across a sea stained with jet fuel. At 5:57 a.m., high-resolution satellite imagery from U.S. Space Command confirmed what Venezuelan Naval Command refused to believe. The Libertad 29 had split cleanly in 2, both halves resting nearly 240 feet below the surface. Inside the command center at Puerto Cabello, chaos replaced confidence. Radio operators replayed the last transmission from Libertad 29, its captain proudly declaring mission accomplished, before the signal went dead at 5:26 a.m. Attempts to re-establish contact failed. The ship's transponder had gone silent the moment the hull collapsed. For nearly 30 minutes, Venezuela issued no statement. By 6:05 a.m., international media had obtained leaked satellite photos showing a plume of smoke rising over a field of drifting debris. Oil futures surged 11% within the hour. Maritime insurers suspended coverage for shipping lanes extending 90 nautical miles around Venezuela's coast. Port authorities in Aruba, Curaçao, and Trinidad issued immediate navigation warnings. In Caracas, silence hardened into dread. No admiral appeared on television. No government spokesperson addressed the nation. The same officials who had boasted of destroying a U.S. warship only 1 hour earlier now faced the loss of their $750 million frigate, obliterated in less than 4 minutes. By 6:10 a.m., the Caribbean returned to an eerie stillness. No radar pings, no missiles, only waves rolling over the grave of broken steel. Venezuela had fired first. Now, it was counting the cost. By 6:15 a.m., as the first sunlight touched the Caribbean, the scale of the crisis had already surpassed the loss of a single warship. What happened in less than 15 minutes had become a geopolitical shockwave rippling across the hemisphere. The numbers spoke louder than any speech. 137 sailors dead or missing, $750 million in naval assets erased, 380,000 liters of fuel spilled, 12% spike in global oil futures, $3.4 billion in maritime insurance frozen, 3 Caribbean ports entering emergency status, and an entire coastline placed on military alert. This was not just a tactical defeat for Venezuela, it was a national reckoning. By 6:22 a.m., the United Nations Security Council received encrypted footage from the U.S. Navy, 9.4 terabytes of radar logs, missile telemetry, and infrared tracking, all proving one fact with absolute clarity: the The United States never crossed Venezuelan territorial waters. The attack had been based on fear, misjudgment, and political bravado, not reality. Inside Caracas, the silence was suffocating. No official press briefing, no apology, no acknowledgement of the sailors lost. The flagship of the Venezuelan Navy now rested 237 feet below the surface, its two torn halves preserved by the cold water like a monument to miscalculation. And yet, amid the wreckage, another truth emerged, one that older American viewers understood intimately. In war, discipline matters more than volume, and restraint is not weakness. The United States had absorbed the blow, protected the carrier, saved nearly 7,000 lives, and responded with a strike calibrated to end the threat without igniting a regional war. Not revenge, not rage, deterrence, precision, control. By 6:45 a.m., the Caribbean Sea had gone silent again, but it was not peace, it was consequence. The waves rolled over a steel graveyard, carrying with them a message that would echo far beyond the waterline. A nation may fire the first shot, but it does not get to choose the price. And in modern warfare, one wrong decision can cost everything: ships, sailors, stability, and dignity. That was the lesson of November 9th, 2025. A lesson written in fire, silence, and steel. By the time the Caribbean returned to silence, the truth had already settled deeper than the wreck itself. What happened on November 9th, 2025 was not just a clash of ships or a burst of missiles. It was a reminder of how thin the line is between order and chaos. One misread radar contact, one emotional decision, one act of misplaced pride, and a nation lost its flagship, its sailors, and its sense of control. The United States had shown something far more powerful than force. It showed discipline in the face of provocation, clarity in the face of confusion, and precision in the face of danger. The carrier remained intact. Nearly 7,000 sailors returned home alive. The fleet stood strong not because it struck hard, but because it struck only when necessary. And for Venezuela, the lesson was carved into steel, now lying 237 feet below the surface. A war can be started in seconds, but its consequences can last generations. As dawn broke across the Caribbean, the world watched, understanding once again that peace is not guaranteed by treaties or speeches, but by restraint, readiness, and the wisdom to know when a single wrong decision can ignite an entire ocean.